Hi, I'm Claire Tompkins, the Clutter Coach, and this is the Organize Your Life podcast. I am passionate about organizing because it makes my clients' lives so much easier, more relaxed, and with more time to spend the way they want to. In every podcast in the show, I'll lay out a simple organizing concept, and I'll tell you why it's important. I'll also include an action step at the end so you can start practicing right away. My specialty is chunking down this big topic so it's not overwhelming. That's the concept for this podcast, which is based on my first book, 52 Simple Ways to Get Organized. The book is available on my website and on Amazon. I work with clients in person in the Berkeley, California area and via email and Skype, so you don't have to be local to me. Visit the Hire tab on my website or email me at claire@cluttercoach.net. If you like the show, please rate it and review it. To do that, go to my website, cluttercoach.net, and scroll down for the show notes. Each show notes post has a link to leave a review in iTunes. I would so appreciate that. Okay, on to the podcast. This is podcast 77, and it's about stories we tell ourselves to excuse our behavior. We think they're helpful because they explain ourselves to us, and that's true. But these stories can be dangerous too because they prevent us from moving forward and changing things that we really want to change. The story I come across most often is the Great Depression story. It goes like this. I have all this stuff because I, or my parents, grew up during the Depression and we had nothing. Or my family kept all these things because they lived through the Great Depression. I am not making fun of these people or taking this lightly. The Great Depression was a sad time in our history, but it also is a limiting story for many people. Another common one is the messy creative person. The story is that if you're creative, you're also going to be messy. And maybe crazy and an alcoholic too, but that's another story. There's a strong association between artistic talent and having your art supplies scattered everywhere. Granted, in some cases, creative people are also dyslexic, and that makes it hard for them to be organized in conventional ways. But often the story is just an excuse to avoid the boring and dull work of putting stuff away. I get that, but it also makes the person's life more difficult when they don't have room to make art or can't find the supplies they want to use. In that scenario, the romance of the cluttered studio falls away. But the reason this is a problem isn't that people are deluded or lazy. It's that they are so captivated by their stories that they can't be objective about what's really happening. Stories are compelling. As humans, we naturally search for narratives to explain the world. We want a logical structure. We want things to make sense. We want to make assumptions based on past experience that turn out to be true. We want to make educated guesses about the future. Stories are also strong. If enough people believe in something, it becomes really hard to dispute it. Actually, people don't even think about disputing it at a certain point. But it's always been this way, they say. I'm not sure when the Great Depression became associated with hoarding, but I can assure you that hoarding existed before that, and it exists in people today who don't have a Great Depression story in their family history. A story like this can be used as an excuse to continue a behavior, or, better, it can illuminate the reason for a behavior and thus make it easier to change. The big question is, are you doomed by your history or liberated by it? Stories give us a place in the world. They make sense of things that otherwise might feel threatening or frightening. But clinging to a story for that reason, despite all the negative reasons, does not serve people. The story that helps explain something can also be a prison. What does this all have to do with decluttering and organizing? Well, when I work with clients, I urge them to be honest about why they want to get organized. It shouldn't be something they believe is the right thing to do. That's just another story. It's not better in any absolute sense to be organized. Being organized needs to be at the service of something else, like making life easier. It has no meaning in itself. There's a book that came out about 10 years ago called A Perfect Mess, in which the authors assert that neatness for its own sake is a waste of time and energy. Well, duh, of course it is. People who practice neatness for its own sake tend to be obsessive-compulsive, and that is nothing to aspire to. Do you have a story that's preventing you from making positive changes in your life? It doesn't matter if the story is true or false. You still have the power to turn it around. You don't have to let it have power over you. Instead of letting the story be an explanation of why you can't do something, Turn it into a limitation that you are going to overcome. Maybe your parents or grandparents did grow up during the Depression and suffered. Now, today, that is not happening. They have everything they need now. There's no rational reason to continue scrimping and doing without. And that's good news. Say you're a creative person with a clutter issue. It feels validating to you to explain your mess by saying that you think outside the box and you can't be held to conformist standards. But you also notice that your work table isn't really usable because of all the stuff on it, and that's probably why you haven't been in the studio lately. Or maybe you can't get to a piece of equipment you really need because it got stuck behind a bunch of other stuff. It's time to reconsider whether you can't use your creativity to invent new and fun ways to keep your tools and supplies set up in a way that enables your work rather than hindering it. Here's what you can do right now. Think about an organizing or clutter problem you have and be honest with yourself about whether you are holding yourself back by being too invested in your story. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm Claire Tompkins, the Clutter Coach. If you like the show, I'd love it if you'd leave a rating and review in iTunes. You can subscribe, too, so the podcast will be ready and waiting for you to listen to. You'll find the show notes on my blog at www.cluttercoach.net, and you can check out my store to find books I've written and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you're a fan of the show, you can become a patron on patreon.com for as little as $1 a month. You can find my page by going to the Patreon website, that's Patreon, and searching on Clutter Coach. I'll still post the podcast free of charge, but I've got some cool rewards for folks who want to help me make the show even better. Come back next week for a new podcast.